It is Brother B Free along with Will McKee, also known as Brother Mackey, and we're back with another week of MEAC'n UP. And we're here to celebrate the football season as it pertains to the MEAC conference and the CIAA to kind of show some love to those conferences. Once again, shout out to those brothers at Swack and the Fool who were a true inspiration. But we felt there was a need to cover our beloved CIAA and MEAC for very multiple reasons because we're tied and locked into that, which we've explained. But enough with that. McKee, what's going on, brother? You ready to get into some football talk?
Ready to get it in. It was a very big week for HBCU football in America in general, and we are
Yeah,
seeing that sports intersects with society so much. Deion Sanders was just on 60 Minutes, so
yeah.
yes, I'm ready to get it in. Let's get it
Hey,
in.
look, this was one of those weekends where you got a good deal of self realization to see where you were and to
Yes.
see your purpose. Because just looking at the MEAC schedule, uh, and granted, I guess it's a gift and a curse. Like only 6 teams playing football, you don't have a large conference schedule. It opens up. You can schedule more money games. You can schedule more non-conference games, especially if you're trying to build up, I guess, the prowess of your program. You know what I'm saying? You put together a tough
Mm.
schedule. And we've seen that early on. And I was just talking with Brother Ricky. I was so happy the Bulldogs from South Carolina State got a weekend to rest because their season schedule to open was woo. And now we're gonna talk about the Eagles at Central that they went. They said the left coast is the best coast, right?
West Side.
West Side. Shout out to the West Side, but they went all the way out to Los Angeles, and and well, we'll talk about that. Closer to home, the CIAA pretty much had their opening weekend of conference football. So you saw the conference matchups taking place this past weekend in the CI. So we'll get to that. Teams can start to see how they measure up against one another. I'm gonna say this, McKee, and I'm gonna let you throw your thoughts. But I think the champ this year. We know Fayetteville State's had kind of a hold on it, but I think the champions coming out of the North this year. That North is looking pretty stout in the CI.
It is. Who you got? Bowie State, who's perennially the last few years has just been in many ways the class of the conference. And then who else we got? Virginia State with that victory last
One,
week over
one
Norfolk
ain't
State.
up, one ain't down.
Yes, big shout out to the Trojans in Ettrick, Virginia. Big shout out to Petersburg, Virginia, Richmond, and that whole area. So Virginia State is strong this year. I think you were telling me they won yesterday.
And Union undefeated.
And you always got to be ready for Union. Union very rarely is down long. They just have a fighting spirit there in Richmond. So
Yeah,
yeah, the North. We the
but
North. Is that what they say in
we didn't know.
Canada?
But we were talking as a whole though. The CI is very competitive this year. You seen
Yeah.
Johnson C. Smith looking better, convincing win. Fayetteville State's gonna be tough. I think uh, Bluefield State in that mix makes it competitive. And your Rams, brother McKee, are always going to be competitive, and they've got some young talent. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting this year. But I'm gonna jump out there and say that the champ will probably come from the North Division. But with that being said, let's jump into the CIAA. And as you see, some of the scores recapturing, but Bowie State was victorious over Shaw. this past Saturday, 21-7. We saw Virginia State with a very convincing win over St. Aug's, 55-12. Virginia Union, like we said earlier, with a strong win over a tough Livingstone team that fought them. Winston-Salem State beat Elizabeth City 24-7, and Florida State had a tough win against Lincoln. And like we said, JCSU, Johnson C, shout out to the Bulls, had a big win over Bluefield State. So we see, our first real look. Everybody's playing in conference this year. Some had some tough non-conference games last week, but Winston's had a tough non-conference schedule. But now they come back, open the conference season with a win, which will give them some momentum. But we see, like we say, some of those in the North Union State, Bowie, doing what they do, being strong, opening up the season. So I'm looking forward for a great race. Any sleepers or surprises in any of those scores, Brother Mackey?
Well, I think the Johnson C. Smith score, the
Mm-hmm.
Johnson C. Smith game. They have had up and down seasons for quite some time now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Here recently, yeah, more down than up. And there's life coming out of Beatty's Ford Road in Charlotte,
Come
North
on, come
Carolina,
on,
with
come
that
on.
proud institution. Great school, great
Yeah,
tradition there.
yeah,
But football has been no crystal stair for them. I think them coming out this early, this strong, uh, is sending the Southern Division on notice that you cannot chalk this game off on your calendar schedule on your wall. You got to come to Charlotte ready to play, and when they come to your campus, those Golden Bulls will be a formidable opponent this year.
yeah,
I mean, we were
yeah,
talking about that earlier.
yeah, yeah, and they ready. Like I say,
Yeah,
I looking at that convincing score against Bluefield State, it shows it's not gonna be easy walk through BD's forward, um, but staying in that, man, Fayetteville State has had some struggles this season. A lot of tough, close, close games. Is it something to be leery of, or is it more so, they got the target on their back now? How do you feel about that? Because they too had a strong opening non-conference schedule, so I guess they wanted to test themselves early. Um, and it's been tough, been close, competitive as expected. They are a good football team, but even in their opener against Livingstone, pretty close game, closer than some may have expected. What do you think? It's the bullseye effect, Brother Mackey, or are there some struggles you think going on?
I think it's both of those. I think it's definitely the bullseye. Coach has established a strong program at Fayetteville State down there. They've been consistently good the past few years, winning it all last year. So yes, they are everybody's big game now. So people are taking the Broncos very seriously. I also think though that we may be in the era of every year is in some respects a brand new year. Uh, Division 2 seems to be not talked about with the transfer portal. Not talked about at all with NIL. And they're smaller market institutions, athletic programs, smaller budget, much 53 so scholarships. It used to be compared to 80 and 90 at the Division 1 and FCS level, but the transfer portal is infectious throughout of all of college football, and people are trying to. Somebody had said, I forget which coach it was a few weeks ago, had said that, well, the transfer portal is making smaller colleges almost like the new JUCO, the new junior college circuit. I play here and try to get noticed, and if possible, move up. No disrespect to where the scholar athlete is, but they're trying to play to move up a lot of times. So hats off to coaches. A
Yeah,
good friend of mine that I was very close with, my teammate at WSSU, Kelly Clark, who is the quarterback and receivers coach at WSSU, and they got that good victory that you mentioned a few minutes ago. They have to work extremely hard now to retain the athletes that they have. There's a lot. If they have a great season, people are calling and they are looking. So that Division II head coaching job is a tough job.
yeah,
And so, depend with all that, the target on your back every week will be a new challenge for
yeah,
Fayetteville State. But I
yeah,
think as the season goes on, though, they've been shown to get stronger as the season gets longer.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And shout out, no disrespect. I meant Lincoln. They had a tough win against Lincoln. I might have said Livingstone. But Livingstone played Virginia Union tough, which might be a shocker. But I think to that point, I think Livingstone, being competitive might be one of those teams that come on as the season progresses that could stir some things up in that South. So I think
Yeah.
the South might be slept on a little bit because of the dominance of Fayetteville State past couple years, but you know the North will be competitive at the top, but don't sleep on the South. Don't sleep on the South. But with that notion, as we get into it, we want to highlight the game of the week for the CIAA, which was Bowie State versus Shaw. And Shaw, coming off some tough losses. They had a tough loss against my Benedict Tigers a couple weeks ago. Tough loss last week. Then they're up at Bowie, and they played Bowie very tough, man. They played Bowie tough, just showing, those in conference rivalries. It's not going to be an easy win, and I think it bodes well, especially as teams measure up and plan and make that strive for the CIAA championship and then eventually to the Division II playoffs. And with the way it's going, it looks like the CI is going to possibly get a couple teams in um, because they're looking good. But um, is it too early to make predictions, Brother Mac? To be honest with you, is it too early to make predictions? Did we do that last
But
week? I know we predicted the MEAC champions, but is it too early in the CI to predict? Oh, can we predict the division winners? Did we do that? We did division winners, but we didn't pick who we think is going to win that CIAA champion. Is it too early?
I mean, no. And I think if we wait too much longer, we'll probably be accused of observing too many trends, and the
Yeah, yeah,
prediction
yeah.
might not have the strength. But and I gotta get redemption based on that. We didn't do one this week, but I gotta make up for those two L's that I took last week. I gotta make up for that.
We'll be back with a Saturday kickoff. We had some other obligations, and we didn't get to make our picks on Saturday. But we'll be back this Saturday to do it. But who are you thinking to come out of the CIAA as the champion?
Yeah.
Who you think?
Right. Yeah. Right now, I would say coming out of the South, this is a big surprise. It's a breaking news. You're gonna be shocked at who I say. Coming out of the South, I'm gonna say Winston-Salem State. I'm gonna say my Rams are gonna go on a streak. They're gonna go on a roll. And if it's not them, and I guess my actual pick, if I'm not with my Ram bias or Winston-Salem State bias, I would say Fayetteville State again.
Yeah.
Um, I, yeah, I mean they're starting off slow, but nobody has shown me that they'll unseat Fayetteville State, and I see them taking on Bowie State again. I think they played in the championship last year,
Hmm.
and but I see Bowie State winning this time. Now,
Okay.
yeah, the kind of program, the quality program that those folk have up in Bowie, Maryland, you don't beat them twice at anything usually. So I would say Bowie State. I predict Bowie State to take it all. Who you got?
Well, I'm gonna agree with you on the South pick. Even though Johnson C. Smith is showing there's nothing to be played with, I still think Fayetteville State, just because I look at the caliber of the preseason schedule, they played tough. But I think this weekend was a tough win that they needed to get the momentum swinging their way. So I'm gonna stay with the Broncos right now. I'm gonna stay with the Broncos for my South pick. But in the North, man, I feel you on that Bowie State, my brother. But I think I'm gonna have to go with the Trojans, man. I'm gonna have to go with the Trojans because they have not
Yeah,
shown any stumble in their step. I mean, they've been winning convincingly. They beat uh, FCS opponent Norfolk State, who then went and beat Hampton. You know, and we know early on the season teams are figuring it out, but still, the feat to go there, beat them. They've had two more convincing victories. They're putting up points. You know, that's a key.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
putting up points. You know that bodes well. So I think I'm gonna go with the Trojans in the North, um, and it's gonna be an interesting matchup. But I'm gonna go with Virginia State to win it all this year. I think it's time for a new champion, man. And
No,
so I'm gonna pick the Trojans to do it all. I just like what I'm seeing out of them early. Now, granted, things could change with certain injuries or whatever, but I like what I'm seeing. I like what I seen, and it's gonna be interesting because they got a pretty favorable schedule. If you know if you like matchups, but the big game comes the first Saturday in October. And I think that will be where we start to get some clarity. And that is when
and
they
that's
go to Bowie, Maryland to take on the
yeah.
Bowie State Bulldogs. Um, we know that that probably will be their first test. And then we know they end the year, of course, with the rivalry with Virginia Union. But uh, that October 7th game is what I'm looking forward to. I think you're going to have two undefeated conference teams. Bowie has one loss non conference, but you look at two undefeated teams that are going to try to make that statement um, for that North Division title. So we'll see. We'll see. All eyes are set on that date. I'm excited as we get close to it, but I'm going with the Trojans, brother Mackey. I'm going with the Trojans, man.
Not a bad. I mean, that's a good pick too. And I think the Bowie State came to Virginia State last year and eked out a win on Trojan turf. So they're gonna be ready to pay them back in Maryland, I guess, this year. And a big shout out to Stan Luter, our cousin. Uh, we got several points of entry for why we discuss black college sports. For me, it's not my playing career because I didn't catch enough passes to talk too much. But my uncle Ken Free and then commissioner of the MEAC for all those years, and then Stan Luter, the voice of CIAA sports. And I gotta check with Stan to see who his pick. Well, he can't pick. He's got to
Yeah,
show
he's got to pick.
impartiality.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And big shout out to Jackie McWilliams, the commissioner for the CIAA. She does a awesome job. Her spirit, her upbeat, and her brilliance is just piloting that conference in a very exciting trajectory, in my opinion. Shout out to her and the hard work that her staff does.
Yes, true that, true that.
Hmm.
So with that said, and just want to run through to accent McKee's picks. You know, Fayetteville State, Bowie State were picked 1 and 2 to finish. Um,
Hmm.
with most picking Fayetteville State to repeat. So it's looking like it's going to round about. You know, Virginia State was picked fifth behind Shaw. Shaw's had a rough
Yeah,
start to the season, so we'll see how that plays out with Virginia Union running at third. So it looks well, and Johnson C. Smith sixth, and then Winston-Salem State. So you know it's shaping up like that, and you're seeing people starting to rise above it. I think uh, 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 you know the North is going to be fierce, and as long as they don't beat up on each other too bad, I think they'll give Fayetteville State a challenge for that title. So
I
with
agree.
that, you know, the picks are in. We gonna see, and we gonna let it
We gonna
be.
see. That's
But
right.
on that note, the name of the show is Me Acting Up. You can find us on the Names Are Not Important YouTube channel, as well as the Names Are Not Important Facebook page, because this is an element of the Names Are Not Important podcast with myself and Brother D. McDonald. So, with that, Brother Mackey, the name of the show
Yes,
is Me
sir.
Acting Up. So, let's go ahead and start acting up. Let's start looking at the MEAC. And this, like we said, this was one of those weekends. And the MEAC
Yeah.
took bumps. The MEAC was fully non-conference, of course, and they got shut out this weekend. Uh, it was a
Yes,
tough one.
they did.
You had a couple
Hmm.
going to play some money games. You had the battle for the right to call themselves the real HU between Howard and Hampton. You had uh, Morgan playing, you know, Baltimore area rival Townsend State. So let's get into the MEAC. And as you see the scores running across, Norfolk State went to Temple and took a tough defeat 41-9. Hampton eked out a close victory at Howard 35-34. The Eagles NCCU took a tough one at UCLA 59-7. Delaware State took a lump at University of Richmond 38-6. And then Morgan State lost a home rivalry battle against Townsend 20-10. And I'm gonna start right there with Morgan, brother Mac. I think Morgan's still kind of woozy from letting that game go against Akron, man. It it,
Yeah.
it was a tough way to lose a ball game. That's one of those things that's tough to recover from. You know,
It
that would have
is.
been a signature win for their program this year. I think it would have gave them that boost to say, "Hey, we can make this run for the Celebration Bowl, man." What's your thoughts, man?
Yeah, those losses are tough, as you said, to get past. You got the game locked up. You need only run out the clock and secure this win that does everything you just said for their season. And on almost a fluke type of fumble, uh, then you've lost the game to a historic win. Possibility is out the door. You fumble that chance, pun intended. So to get your team back up and ready for that next against an opponent that's tough either way.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
you're playing a MAC school, and the MAC, even though it's considered mid-major in the terminology of the tiered structure of major college football, they suffer to no one. They are always going to play hard, Midwest football, hard nosed, and you're going to come away from that game with a lot of folks in the training room iced down because they're going to hit you all night. So,
Yeah, yeah.
they played well in many facets of the game, but like you said, they had that lag from last week. They did.
No doubt. And they've got a matchup coming up a couple weeks in Baltimore against Central. But going to Central, and we gonna tumble back to them to talk about this money game aspect. But um, both took lumps. But being that once again we talk about the MEAC not only having 16, so not a heavy conference schedule, they're playing some pretty tough non-conference opponents all across the board.
Yeah.
South Carolina State, everybody. You know, is that beneficial? You know, is it or is it too much? And I say that because, you know, let's say you have those that play maybe a little bit lighter of the non-conference. They come in a little healthier, less beat up, less beat down, and they come and they sneak up and win that championship. Uh, and and I say it like this, and I don't want to be taken the wrong way, but sometimes it is. You know, when you give it that prerequisite, it usually does. But you always want to have your best representative. Whether it be playoffs, celebration bowl, but these heavy non-conference schedules, man, beat teams up, hurts confidence to where they might not be at their best when it's time to play conference, and then I think it makes them susceptible to some upsets or some losses possibly. Like, I mean, how you feel about that? Like,
Well, that's interesting. And Commissioner Free was at the advent of a lot of having that opportunity. I recall those conversations and with those athletic directors, presidents, and the MEAC office, just having the blessing of having an uncle that was in leadership there. It's debatable. Depending on who you talk to in the the FCS HBCU community, like you said, it's a financial conversation. So we can opine all night on philosophical approaches to that. But if you sit us down in that athletic director seat, if you sit us down in that head coaching seat, and I'm looking at a budget compared to, in this case, my other FCS competitors, I've got
mm,
to be able to hit the road and recruit, send my coaches to Atlanta, and so they could stay a week and don't have to go down there one day. There's a lot of minute details that we won't hash out tonight that make this decision what it is. North Carolina Central made $700,000 by going to UCLA yesterday. I don't know if travel and the hotel and food was included. Maybe some Central Eagles could inbox us or put it in the comments. Maybe they know if that was thrown in. That makes a big difference too. They made $700,000, which is 300,000 short of the Celebration Bowl purse. So let's just say they collect that 700,000. Let's say they run the table in the MEAC, go to the Celebration Bowl and win it. So they're looking at a windfall just off those two games. What 1,700,000
well,
to
if they
their
win the
athletic.
Celebration Bowl, I think they get 1.1. I think there's an extra
What
couple extra,
I
yeah,
see,
there's extra bonus. Yeah, if you
and
win
that's
it, now versus up.
and
Yeah,
in yes, and in those MEAC programs, FCS is a challenge. Period. Let me say that too.
yeah.
HBCU is kind of given this special class for historic and social reasons, and it's very valid. But at the end of the day, they're FCS schools in the MEAC and in the SWAC. FCS is a challenging level of sports to raise
Mhm.
money for,
Yeah.
to find donors. So, if you're not looking at that individual school's spreadsheet budget, you
Yeah.
really can't say if it's worth going to Michigan to make $900,000 and lose 67-3.
Yeah.
North Carolina Central lost yesterday. And we thought they would play them tougher than this, but when you're playing schools with 88 to 92 scholarships,
Hmm.
you're over there with a 58 or 59 or whatever the FCS
Yeah.
level is.
Yeah.
Let's just say it's hot that day.
Yeah.
Your depth chart is it gets
Yeah.
real slim pickings real fast, and that score can just do things. So
It's
I'm gonna say I'm gonna play it. It depends on your school situation. If your
yeah.
budget is pretty solvent and you're doing better than you have before, and you can just play every school you have a chance to beat, why not? That helps you with the playoffs and everything else. But some of these schools need
They need it.
a
I,
booster shot.
I get it. And it might be different if they were maybe in these smaller towns where they're the big game in town. I
Yeah,
look at some of those schools, like Eastern Washington, North Dakota
yeah.
State. They're the biggest
Hmm.
game in town, so the community supports them. It's tough anywhere you are in North Carolina because you have the big three. Well, the big four. Let me throw Wake in there. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. You have the big four with
Hmm.
the status of the ACC. So it's always tough in North Carolina. And then A&T has done pretty well because they're the only game in Greensboro who has football. So they get a little more of the community more so than maybe a Delaware State might. They're competing with the
Right.
University of Delaware.
Yeah.
Norfolk State is competing with Hampton, uh, you know, Old Dominion, all these other schools in that area, William and Mary. So it's hard to get those the community rally, um, but I do feel your point, and I think it's a tough level to be because you don't get the big TV contracts that support a lot of the major five conferences, which keeps them relevant and which brings more of the advertisement dollars and the donors. And then to your point with the scholarships, man, look at how many schools get private donors through endowment funds to give extra scholarships for athletes. So you got some that might not actually be on the athletic scholarship, but they have a scholarship that is for athletics through
So,
another donor. So
so
because they
yeah,
have those funds, go ahead.
it's that intersect. I'm glad you brought that up with race in America too, with what you're describing. I worked for the Phelps Stokes Fund for many years, and they were one of the early funders to HBCUs. They were a rich white philanthropic family out of New York, Tuskegee, Tennessee State. Uh, they were integral to the founding of those schools and the funding of those schools. So one area in this country where the needle has still not moved, and in some metrics has gone backwards, where race and per capita income of African American citizens in this country, which is who these alumni bases at a HBCU comprise of. African American graduates, for the most part, that don't have disposable income to the degree, don't, in too many cases, don't own a tire plant somewhere where they can just write off a donation. It's very real. And it's the fascinating part of how athletics always runs into society at some point, whether it's Jesse Owens at the Olympics in Germany, whether it's the protest in Mexico City, or whether it's Prime, Coach Prime, with a clash of culture in some respects, but in some respects, just a cachet of NFL par excellence. and money, culture, they collide all the time. This is another case. If you don't know the context of the budgets that Southern University, Virginia State University, we'll keep it one AA FCS, North Carolina, and if you don't know their budgets and you don't know how hard it is to make those ends meet, then you really uninformed on discussing this subject with accuracy and realism, because they you don't go anywhere wanting to be beat 63-7, and hopefully you won't be, but it can happen. But you're trying to keep a program competitive, and football is one of those sports that facilities, uh, the quality of your uniforms, the quality of your training table in the cafeteria. These things cost to travel, and athletes who come in with that swag, they want to play at a place where they're going to be taken care of materially. That's not my opinion. That's how things work. So it's not an easy call. I imagine we'll be discussing this, debating this time next year after that second or third week where these money games are played and those scores roll in. It's not easy. It's not easy.
I'm sorry. Did I go mute? I'm sorry. I was sitting there running my mouth. But I'm gonna flip the script right quick, McKee, and I want to give
I
you.
know you so well. I know what you were saying.
Yeah, yeah. I want to flip the script. My bad to the audience. I want to flip the script because can this be a marketing tool or recruiting tool used by the MEAC to say, hey, we've only got 6 schools playing football. So with this, number one, budget wise, you can play 2 money games. Usually teams play one because they don't want to get too beat up. But now you say, hey, you could play 2 money games. You can put some lower level teams on the schedule to kind of balance it to get momentum. And with these scheduling opportunities for money games, hey, that might help as a recruiting tool to get players to come there. Hey, look, we playing Michigan and UCLA in one season. You're gonna be on the big stage. Can they flip it like that? Should they flip it like that? Should we be looking to? Well, I ain't gonna say we because I'm not in the athletic office or playing, but should they use that as a tool to say, hey, we got to get some funding? Why not? You know, our end goal is the Celebration Bowl. So hey, why not? If we got a chance to go out and get 1 million and some change with a couple of money games, and then we're still a contender for the Celebration Bowl where we possibly could win. Hey, let's go get it. And I'm telling you, talk about perfect timing. Oh, there he go. Ladies and gents, it is none other. I'm going 3 screen with it. It is the man, the myth, the legend. It is that brother, Mac, for Mac and Free. Names are not important. So, brother Mac, you came right on time because we're talking about the issue of these money men and the budgets of these schools and how they're maneuvering that. And my thought is, I want your take on this because I love your mind.
Okay.
Can the
Let,
MEAC use this in the schools in the MEAC because they only have 6 teams playing football, which means 5 conference games, right? So they
Right.
have room to have a lot of non-conference. Is it advantageous? Can they flip it and say, "Hey, look, we're gonna play two money games in the regular season to make money"? Okay, let's keep it at that. But also, hey, we could tell the kids, "Hey, when you come here, hey, we're gonna play Michigan and Washington State every year. You're going to be on the big stage." Can they use that as a recruiting tool? You know, or it, is it like, oh, that's just too much? It's too much wear and tear. It's too much. What do you feel on that?
I I think they can. I think that the fact that even though Central went out and got shellacked this weekend, unfortunately by UCLA, I think
You had to
there's
say it like
room
that back
to do
then.
so. What
He
they
said it. He said
that
it
score was
hard.
that score was 59. It was disappointing.
It,
That score was 59-7. Though.
Yeah, that
Can
was
you make
rough.
it?
you said like,
Can you at least make it 59-21? It was 59-7. That's a quintessential shellacking. But I think with names in the MEAC, like a Central, like a Howard, like a Norfolk State, like a South Carolina State, I think they have enough local connections to make that possible, as well as because again, it's a draw to be able to say. You saw what happened with App State; they just played Carolina. That's a 4-hour drive from App State for people who don't know that. Who don't live in North Carolina, it's a 4-hour drive, but it's still close enough, and it gave App State a benefit. But to your point, App State wasn't on the map until they played Michigan and beat Michigan, and now people know more about App State. So I think the more opportunities they have to go into a big
well,
conference.
yeah, and
Yeah,
that motivated them to the push to move up
yeah,
to FBS
absolutely, absolutely,
because they were competing at a high level. Yeah.
that's what pushes it. So I think the opportunity is there, and it brings more opportunity for a MEAC conference or CIAA conference to get better talent just by being able to go out and play against them. Now, playing against them is one thing; being competitive is the other. And that's where that model for what App State did is important. Like, just don't just go out and play them because I don't think kids going to Central because they played UCLA. They would have at least had to be competitive. Like I said, 59-21
Yeah.
competitive. Now again, like I said last week, Central, get your money, man. It's all about pen paper, but if you want to get more of it, I think what's important is you have to go out and be competitive, and that's as long as you can be competitive, you can stay competitive, especially in the recruitment.
And that's the key. And that's that. I often don't try to agree with him on these platforms when we talk sports, but I totally agree because I think that's where it backfires. Because kids might say, "I ain't, yeah, we playing Oregon and Carolina, but I ain't trying to go out there and get beat 60-3."
Yeah,
Let's be real. And I think that's the toughest part of the sale. I mean, economically, hey, it's a good sale. We got room in the schedule to go to Boise State. We got room to go to, you know what I'm saying, Oregon State. But in the end, is it truly helping your program build up and expand? Because I'll be honest, I can see going to an Akron, and we know there were background connections
yeah,
for this matchup with UCLA with the young brother. Shout out to him,
Yeah.
whose parents were Central and A&T grads, so he has a connection. We understand that, but in the greater landscape, and we see this was one of the complaints, Primetime had with at Jackson State. Like, we're not gonna go out there and get beat up for less than $1 million. So, but at the same time, they were filling up them stadiums. They had built up the revenue and attendance, you know, TV. So it was a little different ball game, right?
yeah.
But in the long run, Would it be beneficial if you're not competitive? And my thing is, if we're gonna get the money, man, I think we have to be wise about it. And it might be, hey, we play Kent State and some others we might can hang with, and still, instead of getting the 700, we might get the 400 or the 300. But at least in that sense, being having competitive showings, I think it helps with recruiting.
Yeah. So it's we talked about this. Well, I brought it up a little while ago, and I'm gonna ask the question again. Are y'all familiar with Bishop Sycamore?
No.
All right.
No,
So there's a
sir.
scandal that happened behind Bishop Sycamore 2020, 2021, where this guy started basically a fake high school to be able to compete.
Oh
Part of the
yeah.
reason why I say this is he was able to convince all these parents to bring their kids to this fake high school, and they went out and they were able to compete. Well, they got a ESPN game that aired against IMG Academy out of Bradenton, Florida. Now, this team is out of Columbus, Ohio, and they played in some games. They played a team called Washington Massillon out of Massillon, Ohio. They lost that with 55-17. Then they played St. Ignatius out of Cleveland, lost 65-3. Then they played Aurora, Ohio, team out of Ohio, 58-10. But then they went on and they played against two other teams. One was St. Edward out of Lakewood, and they
Oh
played
yeah.
that one competitively. And then they played another team called Harding out of Warren, and they played that one competitive. That got them aired on ESPN, where they were like, "Oh, this team must be legit. They just played and played competitively." They went on to play IMG and lost 56-6. And it looked so bad on TV, they had the ESPN analysts then questioning whether or not this team was a legitimate school in the first place, and why is ESPN having them here against IMG Academy? The reason I'm saying it like this is because that team got aired in attention because they were able to play competitively in a couple of games, which then led them on to being able to get picked up in a game by IMG Academy. Now, that season got cut short because once IMG tossed them out, everybody was like, this team came like this. There's no way this is a real team.
I think I remember watching
Yeah,
that game.
like
Yeah,
it was bad. But
I
what it
do remember
shows
that too.
is,
Yeah, because I was saying the same thing.
yeah, and it just shows that if you're able to compete, and they went, and actually I think they went on to play Stowe Rocks out of Pennsylvania. That game was 19-7, and then they went on 2 days later. This is the reason why it was such a scandal, to play IMG Academy, and they lost that game 58-0, and it was aired on ESPN. So everybody was willing to air it because they played Stowe Rocks. Stowe Rocks is a well-known school out of Pennsylvania. They played them to the wire, turn around 2 days later and play IMG Academy and get blown out to the point where, and my point is, because they had that game prior to that was competitive, it gave them the opening to play on a national stage. And as long as these teams in the MEAC are able to be competitive on the national stage, their opportunities on the national stage will get bigger. Otherwise, they'll get seen as tune-up games. Like, the winning part is important too. You don't want them on Alabama's schedule where Alabama's already checking the W before the week starts. Like, you want them
Well,
shaking a little bit.
and I'm gonna let McKee tackle that, but that's the struggle though. Can you be national stage on the FCS level?
Yeah.
We kind of hit on that a few minutes ago, why it's tougher on that level. But go ahead, Mac.
No, I want to hear McKee's take on that.
Yeah. So you know that thing of competitiveness. What builds competitiveness? must be the money because it I just saw a SWAC school that I won't name. They had a big discussion about locker rooms, facilities. Facilities are not paid for by wishes, dreams, and hopes. Facilities are paid for by dollars. So if you look at, for example, Appalachian State, you mentioned it. Endowments are always good places to start, in my opinion, for looking at the financial, economic wherewithal of an institution. You got Appalachian State in a resort town, and there, I think, last, remember their endowment, something like $150 million. And you're looking at North Carolina Central, who's a very big HBCU, with an endowment of right around $50 million. That's 100 million. If my math is right, and I'm not a mathematician, that's 100 million. That's a gulf. That's the kind of gulf that will show you why one institution is able to scale up to be competitive, as D is saying, to be Division 1A, because that 150 million denotes business owners, per capita income on a different scale than North Carolina Central. And North Carolina Central's endowment has grown rapidly in respect to its context.
Right.
So I still say that mama may have, papa may have, but God bless the college that has its own. If you don't have, these people are going out and taking these money games in desperation. And like, and you're taking a team to these places, to these bigger markets, and you don't have the depth. You just don't have the depth. Once you get past the first and sometimes second string, it's a big drop off. And that's where the 59-7 scores come from. So until, and I said a little earlier, D, the story of an institution is the story of an institution's people. So if an institution's human the per capita income of African Americans, lack of disposable income, this is not excuses, these are facts. If your alumni population doesn't have it to the degree that another school does, you are sent into the athletic world looking for financial opportunities. Now, Primetime, who was on 60 Minutes tonight, hashtag 60 Minutes, check it out if you hadn't seen it. It was a very good interview, very interesting interview. And he's right next to the president of the Ukraine, was in the next segment. I mean, this is a big attention this coach gets, man, this iconic figure. But he was of the mindset coming out of an NFL mindset, a Florida State mindset, to say, hey, all money, as he said, quote, all money ain't good money. That when they asked him, hey, would you take your team, as D said, to play play Alabama? And he said, all money ain't good money. If we suffer such a loss, if they put 80 up on us, then the way it was a defeating purpose. But he has a mindset, a wealth mindset, because of his lived experience that he worked hard to achieve. But you got to have a lot in your coffers to turn down those bags and those checks. You do?
Yeah, I agree. I think some of it, because there's a lot of it that's based on financial, and I'm gonna go as far as saying it's probably about 95% that it has a lot to do financially, especially when you're talking about playing on that stage, where I'm saying FCS, FBS, whichever one, to play on that stage, national televised games or not, financials have a lot to do with how we bring these players about, and so on and so forth, and then boost those schools. But I think some of it is there's a kind of a throwing up of the hands in terms of resources, what resources that you make available to those kids, and that because there's your reality, and then there are solutions, and you can create whatever you can create solutions based on your reality, right? So if you don't have the facilities, do you have a good understanding of what it takes to play on that level? And if you do you have a way to create a solution so the rest of your team understands how to play on that level? And whether people want to give Dion credit for it or not, I think that's what he was able to do. Because last time I checked, they didn't get brand new facilities at Jackson State when he arrived, but yet Jackson State was competitive. Now at Colorado, different. Those facilities were already there. The endowments already exist. It's a lot easier. But what he did do was it took a lot of players from less than facilities and gave them more facilities. And here they sit now 3-0. So I think while a large part of it, because I don't want to discount the finances that McKee just talked about, but a large part of it is, do you have the coach that's willing to do what it takes to get it done, regardless of the circumstances? Are you creative enough to create better solutions, regardless of what it is that you have? Like, can you make a meal out of a loaf of bread and a slab of fish? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is that same thing? And what I'm talking about here has less to do with finances and more to do with mindset. And if you want to be able to compete on that level, I think the coaching mindset has to be one way so that everybody else can follow. Again, we watch whether you hate Dion and love Dion, that's what he's been able to do. And that's the thing that gets missed. So he gets the guys behind him. And then the rest of the world follows as a result, because he's such an iconic figure, because he's so polarizing. The rest of it follows that. But what gets missed is his work ethic and his team. And I think if the MEAC can have that, and I'm not saying that's why Central got beat 59-7. I'm pretty sure that when you see 59-7, that's all talent. There's nothing else to that. Like, there's a huge talent disparity. But Morgan State, as we talked about last week, just went up to Akron and almost won that game. They only lost by 3, and that was due to a scoop and scoop. So,
Yeah, scoop and scoop.
like, but again, they went on to compete, which shows that it can be competitive, and that's where you go get the money, just so that you can be competitive.
But that's the difference. You know, speaking of, like, is it better to go to a UCLA who's ranked top 25,
Mm-hmm.
a Big Five school, or is it better to go to the Akrons, those who we can be more competitive against, in order to have that showing that kind of brings about that buzz, that rally? But to the point, because sometimes I think we put a lot on the coaches because they're the faces of the program, but a lot of it is the administration of that program, the athletic directors. They have to have the vision first
Right,
and say, we want to go to these
right.
places. Here's the coach that we feel we can put out in the front of that. And I think that's been the issue, um, because finding that blend is tough, because you want to make sure you have a guy that's, or lady. Now we got women coaches, but you want to have a coach in there that can handle the X's and O's, but also can catapult your program to the next level. Now, how many can do that have the celebrity of a prime time, but that can attract the the attention and get it done with the X's and O's. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
And
So
I think that vision has to be shared, not just from the AD, but the coaching staff alike, in order to get it done. Like, you really, it really takes a lot. to get everybody within any organization all on the same page in order to go in that right direction. And that's where I say, all right, a doubt, money aside, where's everybody else in their thought process? Because the first thing has to be belief. Like there's going to be talent disparities, there's going to be endowment, there's going to be money disparities all over the place. But where's the mindset? Because when you start talking about where a lot of kids should go, I mean, a lot of times, more times than not, it's better for the development of kids when they can go where their talents are going to be utilized and more appreciated. Now that's different from being able to have the talent. But then we both know from coaching that there are developmental upsides. And there's a lot of talent in MEAC, CIAA, but then there's the question of the development, right? Does that university put forth in priority their development? And that's where the solutions are developed from there. Like, all right, this is what we have to do to get there. How do we do that with the resources that we have in place? So there's the development. And that's where the question gets answered to me about, do I send my kid to this school based on, I think it won't just be the opportunities by itself. It's how we're developing so that we can get the opportunities. And that's across the board administratively. Everybody, coaching staff, ADs, everybody have to be on that same page in order to do it. And I think you can build yourself a substantial amount of opportunities, especially monetarily, once you're able to answer that question internally.
Now, what I would say real to that though, I would say that the things that y'all have named as far as the creativity, the vision, the foresight, I think all those things determine how good you're going to be at FCS level.
Yeah.
Those things can impact how you do on your level.
Yeah.
When you're talking about going to play, y'all know how much money is in UCLA that where you can pay North Carolina Central $700,000 and not miss it? I mean,
yeah.
you're talking about going up to D1, and when we were in college, you know, D1 schools were given 80 to 90 scholarships for football, and the limit for 1AA now FCS was like in the 60s.
Yeah.
And then Division II limit was in the 32 or 33. So you take 60 athletes on a travel squad to go to play at UCLA and in the hot weather, and those 65, no disrespect to those scholar athletes that have much more value than how they run up and down the field, but those 65 are not UCLA's 65.
Right.
Not to mention the depth drops off from first string to second string. It's a big drop off in FCS. So I just personally, from what I've seen, I think what y'all are saying matters a lot to having a top tier FCS program if you're North Carolina Central or if you're Alcorn State. The leap to be competitive with the SEC, the ACC, those Power 5 folks, it takes an infusion of infrastructure, revenue, cash to sustain a football program. I think with basketball, you possibly could get lucky and land a sub-Fab 5 or something that might come to your school and, you know, make a big difference. But with football, it's just so many numbers. It's just so much equipment. It's just so much on facilities. It is a money game. And I just, from what I see, you can't reduce it to ideas, or different things like that. For example, even Jackson State under Deion Sanders, they beat Campbell at the end of the game, barely,
Yeah. Yeah.
and lost in the Celebration Bowl to North Carolina Central. So as good as he is, as good as he was then, he was even at a loss with, hey, and the first thought is to the Jackson State University administration is y'all got to support me more. But if you look at those budgets and what Southern Miss has versus what Jackson State has just to work with, it's a different deal. And that even factors into what kind of administration you're able to bring to your institution, what kind of coaches you're able to recruit and retain. Once they do well, they're usually gone. Just like Deion Sanders. If they knock it out the park, somebody's coming with a bag that they can't refuse. And if prime time can't refuse it, and he's with Aflac and Subway, he's got checks, NFL Network or whatever. If he had to take it, John Doe, who's coming up from probably humble beginnings. Now I'm a coach, and LS, somebody offers me $4 million a year. It's just tough sledding. And I think, and I'll close by saying it's a real decision with FCS, white or black, and in this case HBCU, FCS schools. That is a tough decision because the shellacking that D talked about can happen. The shellacking, that thing can get really ugly really fast. But you felt like you had to take the bag, and you wanted to give your kids a good picture was seeing Tennessee State's team walk around Notre Dame's facilities, the football field, and just kind of check things out. It was a great exposure for them. Y'all are coaches. We want to expose our kids to bigger possibilities and other things, but at what cost? Tennessee State rebounded really well. I think they won this week. I think they beat. It's slipping my mind who they beat, but they won this week. So Notre Dame, they didn't suffer too many injuries at Notre Dame, so they won in fine fashion this week. And they may be a better team, from playing Notre Dame. I mean, you never know.
But it's so. And I got to ask this question because I often wonder about this. What is the difference? Because there was, you had big names in HBCU sports like Clarence Big House Gaines, where you had people who are coming from all over the country to play for him. What do you guys think the difference is from then to now, to where you don't hear as much about the respectable name? And I mean, you had the Grambling State coach too, which his name escapes me. So you have to forgive me, but that was a big name. Eddie Robinson. Matter of fact, Eddie Robinson.
Come on, man.
Was like you had those big names in HBCUs that brought the talent, and what's the difference between them and the coaches that we have now? Like, were there more resources at WSSU during the Clarence Big House Gaines era than there are now? Was it more equal? Like, that's a real question. What is the difference now?
Well, I'm gonna answer that twofold. Number one, you don't see many coaches staying at places as long as they did. Because you move now as you move to the next hottest thing. And a lot of that is because when they started, they didn't have many opportunities anywhere else.
Right.
The other fold of that is still to the point of it still was, even though it was integrated, there still were limits to how many places the blacks could go and in what number. So many of them still went to our HBCUs because that was the best opportunities. So you still were getting top athletes up through the 70s. It didn't really kind of tailor off until about the 80s, where you started throwing more shoe money and contracts and everything into the mix. So so that's twofold. I mean, you look at Eddie Robinson and Big House Gaines. I mean, they were there 30, 40 years to where they were attached, and they kind of established and set the standard for these programs. But you just don't see that nowadays, I think, and it's tougher to have those names because everything now is what have you done for me lately? To where back then the standard was on being the right person to mold young men into being great men. Yeah, we want to win, but it didn't have the penalties that it has now if you don't win or if you have a string of bad seasons. You're not right out the door. You're not on the hot seat. so so now it's 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 a culmination of those things, I think, and that's why we don't see names getting established. Like now, the names we see are those that have teams in national championship contention or are always winning, and now they get the name and they pave. They can kind of pave their own path on a journey. Okay, you won a national championship, so we ain't gonna rush to get rid of you if you have a bad year, or we're gonna give you a little extra time because you've done this for the university. But oftentimes you don't see that on the HBCU level anymore because if you're not as successful now, they like, oh, he gotta go. The fans and everybody's impatient now.
Microwave
You know,
society,
Uh,
it
large
is.
part of the
yeah,
problem. Yeah.
and, yeah. I'm glad you. I agree with everything you said, Ben. I'm glad you brought that up, D. That's a great question because so many people don't have a clue on why not now. And I think your question is so important as you even the context of with prime time. It like being said, Big House comes to Winston-Salem State pre-integration. Eddie Robinson comes to Grambling pre-integration. As being said, you couldn't go to LSU then. You couldn't go to App State then. So you're gonna come to Winston-Salem State or Johnson C. Smith. It's gonna have if you want to coach. Winston-Salem State was called Teachers College because that's where the African American teachers had to go in the state of North Carolina to get teachers degrees to teach school. You couldn't go to UNC Chapel Hill. So to your question, it was a forced situation with American apartheid, I would call it. And so just briefly, I say, our community has got like a paradox going on because our civil rights leadership fought to integrate and to be able for our athletes, our students, our staff, our coaches to go to UNC Chapel Hill and Clemson to play, to coach. That's what we were fighting for, people would argue. And
Yeah.
then you got these institutions that are vestiges of segregation, and they should always be revered because of the role that they play. But in 2023, crime is so big because people are really energized by people going to get their bag, going to the top level that their talents will take them. And this is an underlying little thing I hear people saying, don't let the group hold you back. you know,
Hmm.
don't let the politics of your community stop your living your best life, cause they can be trifling too. So they salute Prime a lot with Prime.
Yeah.
Like, hey, don't let your community block your blessing. Either fight for them, but if you get a chance to elevate, go. And I see that in social media where he's concerned. This whole argument that was not being made by the athletic director at Jackson State or the president. They played this thing, I think, very well. But a lot of the Jackson State supporters, not all of them, but some of them were saying, stay. Baby, won't you just stay? But hey, the majority of the internet was saying, follow your gifts and graces and talents and go get that bag, bring black athletes up there, make their band do a little two-step a little more, and go get yours too. It's an interesting dance that we as African Americans in this country have had to do, this waltz, this two-step, to where we want to integrate. But our old black institutions, it's hard to make an argument to say you ought to come here to coach because you're obligated. Well, what we fighting for Prime to be able to go to Colorado? I mean, that's not my opinion. That's what we were saying in our leadership.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Yep. True that. And that's the catch 22, as they say.
Yeah, it
You know,
is.
you fight for it, and now you know with the lack of resources for whatever reason, or the disparity in resources, it you know you see the effects of it, whether good or bad, however you measure it. But you're going to see more of it, like they call it, brain drain. You know,
Yeah,
where the top intellectuals from countries go to where the opportunities are greater, and it doesn't stay at home in their country sometimes. You know, that's what we call it. And it's the same scenario. So go, you had something, Mac,
yeah.
brother Mac?
No, I just wanted to say this real quick before we pivoted. I'm doing a different dance. Like that's my explanation to Dee's point, or you could say my counter pushback. But I think you got to have Dee's philosophy to be successful there. I hope that's not confusing. I have a response to what Dee
Brother,
said.
I'm confused now.
Right. I, I, because everything's so monolithic on these shows nowadays. You got to see it this
Yeah,
way and ride with that,
Right.
or you
yeah,
waffling. But that's
yeah.
my response to D. But I think D's mentality and his approach, that's what you gotta have to go to our places and be successful. You cannot go bogged down by what hadn't happened yet. Like sometimes we go in and it hasn't happened to us yet, and we already counting it like it did. You got to push that stuff out your mind and say, yes, we're at Morgan State, but we don't have any barriers. We don't have any limits. If we can be creative and imaginative, everything you said, D, I ain't got to repeat. That is the mindset I think you gotta have. You can't be bogged down with with your disadvantages so much so that it locks up your creativity
Yeah.
and can become an excuse if we're not careful.
Absolutely.
It can.
That's where excuses are born. To be completely honest with you, like it's because and going back to your point, like we don't have a monolithic view. Like we're not mutually, these things aren't mutually exclusive. Both things can be true. So
Yes.
it doesn't mean that the difference in opinion means that one's false and one's true. Both things can be true. We're just
Yep.
adding insight to it that says, look, if I'm at Morgan State, using that one as an example, and I see that they have a workout program, we're just gonna have to work harder because we don't have the money. And there's the,
Yeah.
I mean, again, and I think this way because again, I coached a team in a school that was new. It did not have facilities. It did not have a weight room. It did not have a gym on site. There wasn't anything that the organization could do because they were cash strapped and they were young. To be completely honest with you, every school that we beat, even on through into the championship, had everything that I just named. One of the one that we beat for the championship has one. Hell, they have a collegiate like endowment for it. To be completely honest with you, along with the
Right.
facilities to go with it, and they had all the talent. It was the coordination for them when we showed up. So the only thing I had going into the season was building a mentality. We had just come out of a season where we were under 500. It was albeit it was our very first season, but we were under 500. We weren't associated with any conference, and we had no resources. So all we had to build was, and that's the reason why I believe in it, because like sometimes if that's all you got to work with, you either gonna leave it and let it be your excuse, or you're gonna do something about it. It's really up to you. And when you talk about the endowments that are at the other schools, that's true. They have support. That to me, what it means is they have great support systems. Well, the way to build great support systems is to build great cultures. And instead of university or colleges, or not colleges or universities, but coaches, lot like resting on their laurels of the excuses, start building the culture and watch it follow. And we talk about Jackson State, but that's what happened at NC Central with Lavelle Moat. And a lot of people don't give a lot of credit to that. He came and he built the culture. So if you want to understand, I'm not 100% sure in all the details that went into NC Central being able to play UCLA, but I'm pretty sure it starts with NC Central's basketball team and the ability to compete against UCLA's. So that opens the door for the football team. And that building a culture in one can affect all the other ones. So that's where the focus, I feel like, should be, is on the philosophy. That's where it starts. And if you want the endowments, like if you don't have a LeBron, build one. What's that? What's the that old Jay-Z line? They say they made Hov, so make another Hov. Make one. Like you gotta, if you feel like you that guy, go make that guy. Make somebody better. That's a reflection of you. And I think that's how you
Easier
get there.
said than
That's
done.
no shot taking at any of the HBCU coaches, because I think they're great. But I think that if I were to seep into anybody's mind and say you want to start something, start there. Make one. If you don't have a Jerry Rice, get one with the potential and do what you can to make one. And then we'll see what
Well,
happens.
shout out to Valley State in the swag. Jerry Rice comment. We got okay. Shout out to Mississippi Valley State. So
Again,
look, as we
I'm glad you said it, because that's the point. Like again, an
hold
HBCU had Jerry Rice, the greatest wide
on,
receiver of all time.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Don't be cutting me off like
You
that.
know what?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Say something will come out of my character. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Uh, but anyway, that's how we flow, y'all. If y'all ain't caught names and not with Mac, y'all
Please
need to,
check it out.
because we being kind of nice, because you know what I'm saying, we just get. But anyway, there's another. We gonna get into that later. But as we wind it down, one thing we like to do um, is go beyond the lines of the field or the court, and we like to also highlight the excellence of the institutions as it pertains to the academics and some of the things that they're doing to change the world. So I'm gonna toss it to my wide out right here. We just gonna do a stop and pop real quick, and I'm gonna hit you right there, let you do the rest with it. But key to highlight our institution for this week.
Yeah, and before I do that, please, I'll echo that. Go check out Names Are Not Important by Mac and Free. We are extremely cordial tonight. I don't know what it is. It could be it was a tough weekend for those money games with with the MEAC. I don't know, something's got us real kumbaya-ish. But hey,
We
but it
felt
is
the
what
beat
it is.
down. We felt the beat down as well.
Yeah, we felt it. We felt it. So
Contact
yeah.
PJ.
So this week's academic program takes us back up to Bowie, Maryland, to the great Bowie State University Bulldogs, where I highlight their entrepreneurship hybrid conference, which is a part of their entrepreneurship innovation center right there on campus. The exponential power of collaboration is the theme of the third annual HBCU Entrepreneurship Hybrid Conference, hosted by Bowie State University Entrepreneurship Innovation Center. On this happened on well, no, this will be taking place on Wednesday, September 27th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in conjunction with the National HBCU Week conference to punctuate the strong connection between HBCUs, educators, partners, and entrepreneurs. So please go to the Bowie State website at bowiestate.edu and check out the Entrepreneurship Innovation Center there on campus. If you are a young person and you want to build your own Fortune 500 company yourself to go with these no barriers outlook, please check out Bowie State. They have an entrepreneurship innovation center there that will facilitate your dreams so you can give that $1 million check like P. Diddy did or Diddy did the other week we gave it to Jackson State. And again, that conference takes place September 27th, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Thank you, Bowie State, for all that you do. And this week, you're our favorite HBCU. Back to y'all.
No doubt, no doubt. So before we close out, Matt, we kind of made some predictions. I need you to throw your CIAA hat on, and let's test it. We were wondering, is it too early because now the CI is getting heavy into conference play. We know the preseason polls had the Fayetteville State Broncos #1, Bowie State 2, Virginia Union 3, Shaw 4, Virginia State 5, Johnson C. Smith 6. I'm gonna stop right there. That's half the conference, the top six. But you see those three teams from the South and those three teams from the North. But we were wondering, was it too early? And we said, well, we don't want to wait too long to make a prediction because it might look like we've seen too much. So in that, we kind of made some predictions, and Brother Mackey made the prediction. Well, he went with the Rams as his favorite in the South for his ties, but he said with non-bias selection, he was going to go once again with Fayetteville State out of the South. Then he was going to go with Bowie State out of the North. And then he said that he felt Bowie State had enough to win the crown this year in the CIAA championship. Myself, I also agree with Fayetteville State coming out of the South, even though I like Johnson C. Smith to give them a little run. But I'm going a little different in the North. I'm going with the Trojans of Virginia State because they've been dominant so far. And also with that, I picked them to win the CIAA championship this year because they're putting points up, brother. So you have it. We both agree on Fayetteville State out of the South, but Brother McKee goes with Bowie to win it all. I'm going with Virginia State. What say you, my brother?
All right, so I'm gonna start with this. Actually, I'm gonna start in the North, and I'm gonna just give you my general overview. It doesn't make any sense. I don't have any logic to back it. I'm going to play the middle and go Virginia Union.
Okay.
Because they're 3-0, and I don't know anything else. But in the South,
I like it. I like it.
But in the South, I'm still sticking with Winston-Salem State. I'm going back where I was last week. I like this quarterback at Winston-Salem State. And they are 1-0 in the conference, 1-2 overall. All their losses are non-conference losses. And I just got a feeling that he can light that field up in conference. Like I like him. I like him a lot. So I'm sticking with Winston-Salem State on that one. McKee's alma mater. So I want to make sure that we point out to everybody else that he's going against Winston-Salem State, not me. So
no, he named Winston-Salem State first.
Oh, he picked Winston-Salem State first?
Yeah.
He picked them first, but he said a lot of that was leaning on his bias. So he said if he was going from strict objective sportcaster mode, he probably would go with Fayetteville State. But he did pick Winston-Salem State.
I mean, Winston-Salem State, their two losses were against ODU and Central, and they weren't two bad losses either. Like they were somewhat Central won by.
They scored a couple late. I was watching
in the
that
Central game, yeah, but ODU they lost that game by 12.
But that was ODU, the Ohio Dominican University.
Oh my God, Ohio. You're right. You're absolutely right.
That wasn't ODU. No, they still
wrong one.
Good.
I got the wrong. I got the wrong ODU. My bad.
It's a tough. No. But it's a tough non-conference schedule.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to be better for it, like you say, because they got a young team, young quarterback who looked good.
Yeah,
he looked good.
And he just lit up. He just lit up Elizabeth State.
Yeah. So who do you have taking it all though in the CIAA championship between Winston-Salem State and Virginia Union?
So I don't have Winston-Salem State taking it all. I feel like they can, but based on what I've going with based off what I've seen so far.
Well, you got to go with you. You said they're gonna win the North, so if it ain't Winston-Salem State,
yeah, I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'm gonna stick with Virginia Union because they.
I mean, on record.
I mean, they.
I think he was trying.
Now again, I don't. They beat Livingstone. They beat Shaw, but they murdered Morehouse. But I don't. That's not saying a whole lot. So.
But
I'm a little hesitant. This again is fluid. Where I stand right now, it changes from week to week. Let's see how they do against Fayetteville State next week. I believe they'll be able to handle business against St. Augustine and Elizabeth City State. But then they got Fayetteville State coming up next week. Then 3 weeks after that, they have Bowie State, which are to me the bigger test. So it's fluid. Let's see how they handle against Fayetteville State. I may change my pick.
No.
Oh, it's fluid.
I wish I had the little boo button.
It's fluid.
I boo. Watch it. I saw a tomato fly past your ear. Hey, look, we're not taking this back, brother. We're not taking this back. This is where we stand. We might let you make one adjustment.
I'll stick with it if I got to, but.
Because in the next, let me say this: we'll come back in about 4 weeks and go with a final for sure pick. Because by that time, some of the top of those divisions will have played each other. You'll have a measuring stick. You'll kind of see, and then of course, when we get down to the championship game, we'll see who's in it, and then we'll make another prediction. So, but this is where we start preliminary. This is our preliminary.
Yeah.
But it's all good. It's all good. But on that note, we're gonna wind it down. Any final thoughts y'all want to share before we break out?
Thank y'all for watching.
No doubt. No doubt. Brother Mackey.
Yeah, thank y'all for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Check out Names Are Not Important on Facebook. And what are other platforms we can find us?
Instagram, YouTube. YouTube is the primary one. Like and subscribe. We'll have new episodes.
Mac and Free on Instagram. Names Are Not Important on Facebook, and then Names Are Not Important on YouTube.
And let me say this real quick.
Go ahead.
Let me say this real quick. Y'all, we've said a few things about Morehouse and their football program. Made a few little chuckle joke. I did not know that Dr. Mordecai Johnson, who is one of our luminaries, and I think he went on to be the president of Howard for years. He was a mentor to Dr. King. He was a quarterback at Morehouse. So Morehouse has had the most intellectually gifted quarterback in the history of all of football. I just wanted to throw that in. I saw that the other day. All right, Ben. Peace to Morehouse and the ATL.
If we gonna do that, then I gotta give a shout out to one of my master teachers who was a defensive back at Morehouse, Dr. William Gunn. Shout out Dr. Gunn, Benedict College in the house.
Dr.
Hey,
Gunn.
and that's where I wanna that's where I wanna give my final shout out to my Tigers. 3-0. We finally gave up a touchdown. We still won 48-7, 40. I can't remember. But we did give up a touchdown. And next week, we coming to Murfreesboro, Shawan. So y'all get ready. We're coming up there to handle that business. Because y'all should have stayed in the CIAA. But we ain't gonna talk about that. But anyway, but as for MEAC'n UP, man, we appreciate everybody joining. Go check us out. Like, share, and keep telling everybody about us. But until next week, MEAC'n
Next week I
UP.
have lights and I'll be on time. I hate technology.
It's all good, brother. And with that, we out.